Welcome back to the lead seat. I'm glad to have you back.
Yeah,
I know we were going to talk today about recognizing self-imposed barriers in leadership, which I think is a really kind of reflective. I'd like to have some discussion about reflectiveness and understanding what it is and how leaders can overcome this and understand when its head kind of creeps up into their profession, whatever their profession is or their leadership style might be.
yeah,
So let's get started. I have here discussing self-imposed barriers in leadership. It explores how leaders can sometimes limit themselves
yeah.
without realizing this.
Mm,
And what I'd like to do is help listeners out there today get greater self-awareness and become more effective in their roles. And so we have some discussion topics, and I want to get Nicole's, thoughts on these discussion topics around self-imposed barriers. So I think, Nicole, the first thing we need to do is kind of understand, what self-imposed barriers is all about. So, and how do they manifest themselves in leadership? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, when I think about self-imposed barriers, I think, okay, this is something that if I had to speak for myself and have self-imposed barriers, this is something that I feel like it's going to stop me, or I'm not going to achieve something that I want to achieve, or something is in the way that I'm putting there, that's hence self-imposed, that is blocking me from doing that next thing or making the change or trying to achieve a goal. So an example would be like fear of failure, right? I'm scared I'm going to fail. So I'm not going to, step into that role. I'm not going to do that task or put myself out there. And then that's intentional when you decide you're not going to do something because you have a fear. Another example some people don't think about is perfectionism.
Okay.
So I'm not the president of the perfectionism club, but I'm a member, right? So I'm trying to get rid of my subscription
Right.
because it's something that hinders us because everything has to be perfect, and that time and attention we're giving it is not always necessary. So it's a self-imposed barrier because it's stopping us from doing everything we need to do because we're trying to make it perfect,
Perfect. Hmm.
right? So those are just a couple of examples of self-imposed barriers. And a lot of times I think of construction, right? When they put barriers up when we're on the road, that either detours us from getting where we want to be or it stops us completely.
Hmm.
And until we intentionally become self-aware and then remove those barriers, that's when we get the flow. That's when we get moved toward where we want to get and what we want to achieve.
You know what? That brings a thought to mind for me. Self-imposed barriers like overthinking things. I know that I can think of some clients that I've had, and they just continue to overthink and had to walk through a process of, let it go. Okay,
Right.
it's okay. It's fine like
Yeah.
it is, but this overthinking stalls. Then they get stalled, and it's like a barrier. They can't get past
Yeah.
this barrier of overthinking that, let me make one more change or let me add one more thing or something like that. So I think that's another self-imposed, barrier is overthinking as well.
Yeah.
For me, I've done that, there's been times when I'm on things, I'm working on things and I overthink it. And sometimes I have to just tell myself, leave it, let it go. It is what it is. You can come back later.
Mhm.
Sometimes you can always come back with a fresh perspective and a mind
Absolutely.
shift that says, okay, now I can look at this with fresh eyes because I stepped away from it instead of continuing to try and overthink it. And then I think your brain just kind of shuts down. It doesn't want to, it does shuts down
Right.
think anymore. Yeah.
And you need a reset, right? You need
Yeah.
a reset
Right.
sometimes. But even with that, because with that overthinking comes that perfectionism too, right? Because you're overthinking it because you want it to be perfect, you want it to come off a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that overthinking is the what ifs. Those are the barriers. What if this doesn't work? Or what if they respond this way? And what if they do this? And what if they do that? And you don't know until you actually move forward. But because you're doing all the what ifs or overthinking or trying to make it perfect, you don't get to where you need to be sooner rather than later. And I want to say this: there's no shade on perfectionists there. When I say
No.
that, I'm truly thinking that yes, I want it perfect. Sometimes I get caught up in stuff, but
Mhm.
that self-awareness is just like, okay, just like you said, it is what it is right now. I can get a fresh perspective, but at some point, I need to leave it alone,
Yeah.
right? I
Right.
need to leave it alone and let it ride and let it go, as opposed to that self-imposed barrier of delaying what I need to do in order to achieve whatever it is I'm trying to achieve.
Mhm. And another thing I thought about was you see a lot of this in micromanaging.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there is this feeling of control and micromanagement. So you over rely on the fact
Mm-hmm.
that I have to control everything, which falls into micromanagement. And I get it has its place at
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
time, but when that skill is kind of overused, it can
Mm-hmm.
also create a barrier for you as well. When
Mm-hmm.
that micromanagement skill, sometimes you have to do it, but a lot of times what happens is you over rely on, I have to have control of everything. And that comes from that micromanagement kind of mindset. So,
Yeah.
that being said, let's talk about mindsets. Okay. So, let's talk about what would be for you a mixed mindset versus a growth mindset and how either can limit or empower a leader. What do you think about that? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. I've had this conversation with a colleague a couple months ago, and we talked about fix versus growth and the impact of one versus the other. And she gave me a very simple example of her, working with her 8-year-old son and doing math.
Mhm.
And he's like, Mommy, I can't do this. And she said, Well, is it that you can't do it or you just don't know how yet? Right. And if he was set in the fixed mindset, it's like, I can't, it's over, it's done. Let's fold this paper up and go play versus, oh, I don't know it yet. So what can I do to get to know it? Go back into the other pages, practice other problems that will help him solve that problem. And as we've talked about before, that fixed mindset, it reveals an inadequacy in some sense, right? Or I can't do it because I'm not good at math, or I'm in real world, or I'm not good at communication, or I'm not good at giving feedback as a leader, right? So I can't do it. And it's left there, but what's the impact on the individuals that need your feedback as their leader, as their manager, as the person that's managing what they do and actually judging their performance.
Mhm.
But that growth mindset is what are the possibilities? What are all the perspectives? What else is the question that comes to mind? What else? What else? What else? As opposed to being stuck in a box, you're climbing out of it with that growth mindset and exploring and not limiting yourself. Right. And that's what happens a lot with the self imposed barriers. We limit ourselves because of fear. We limit ourselves because of overthinking or perfectionism or the I've seen a lot and experienced a lot in my coaching is people saying, I should be here right now in my career, but I'm not, I'm wondering what that is. And I'm like, should you be there? Because, in terms of assessing where you are and making those steps, but that's a tremendous amount of pressure to put on yourself. Like I should have been here by this age. So because you're not, what are you doing to yourself like beating yourself up is what you're doing because you're not there. And can you use that energy, or where can you use that energy where it will benefit you
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to bring you down or tear you down when it comes to that barrier?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you and I both being in the adult learning
Yeah.
industry and both being coaches, we know a lot about growth mindsets. And
Yes.
it's all about, I think it's all stems around learning. And
Mm-hmm.
people really, a lot of times, don't even know, even if they have a fixed mindset, a lot of times they don't know that they are growing and learning with a growth mindset. Because if you get in a car, put on the GPS to go somewhere that you've never been before, you have actually learned how to get there. So that's
Yeah.
not a fixed
Yeah.
mindset. You took it upon yourself to learn the way to get to a new destination if you're going on a road trip or
Absolutely.
any place new that you've never been before. So I think a lot of
Mhm.
people take for granted, or I shouldn't say a lot of people take for granted, but people sometimes will take for granted that, you know, they don't they don't own what can I say? They don't own the abilities that they have. They think they
Mm,
don't have
hmm.
the abilities, but
Yeah.
those small little things is
Hmm.
really a growth mindset.
It
Okay.
really is. It is.
If they people maybe think in those terms of those little bitty things that I do every day when I go somewhere new or do something different that I've never done before, I'm in my growth mindset. And that
Yeah.
makes kind of break down a little bit of that barrier, of self-imposed barriers that may help break that down, that wall down a little bit. Yeah.
They might not even know and identify it
Mhm.
like that. And hopefully watching this
Mhm.
podcast will be like, you know what, I don't do that. And as a coach too, sometimes when we have that conversation, well, I've never done that before. And we ask it, well, tell me about a time when you've achieved something. What did you do? How did you accomplish it? How did you feel when you accomplished it?
Mhm.
How can you take some of those things that you use to achieve that and
Mhm.
apply it to this situation? So it's so true what you say, we forget how to tap into
Exactly.
all the great things we've done before in order to do something new.
Right.
And a lot of times that fear of failure or whatever it is, it creeps up
Mhm.
and pushes us into that fixed mindset, and not it doesn't allow us to stay in that growth mindset.
Right. So I want to shift a little bit and talk about the fear of vulnerability and authenticity
Mhm.
when it comes to
Mhm.
self-imposed barriers. So, how does the fear of being vulnerable, how can leaders prevent that from becoming forming? How can the fear of being vulnerable can prevent a leader from
Mhm.
forming strong, authentic connections?
Hmm. It's so interesting. Like when you advance in your career, I mean, it depending on your environment, depending on who you are as
Mhm.
an individual. Sometimes, overall, commonly, we forget that we're human, and it's just like, and it's not a conscious thing to forget that you're human and that you should be vulnerable and that you can be open and social and connect with people. I think we get caught up in the titles or the responsibilities
Mhm.
of being a leader. So we have to be a certain way and do a certain thing. And it's unfortunate that vulnerability doesn't run parallel with leadership. The stigma of that is like, I'm going to have it together all the time and steer the ship, when in fact I need a whole crew behind me in order to do that. And in order for me to really be a good leader to them, I have to show them some of me.
Mhm.
And in order to make that connection, I have to show them some of it. In order to create that relationship that will allow me to be vulnerable and make that connection, I have to just be human and say, you know what, this project is huge for us. We don't want to fail, but if we do, we'll learn from it together. I failed before, and this is what happened when I failed, and this is what I learned from it. I want all of us to be in that mindset. It's like yes, we're going to for the goal and the achievement. But we don't even talk about that now, but if we don't get there, that's okay. And let's talk about, what I could do better, what you could do better, and be totally vulnerable in that sense and not go get lost in the title, in the role, and the responsibility of leader. Still human, still feel, you still need and want to give empathy and be open and say, I'm kind of scared that this might not
Right.
work. Not because of what you haven't done or what I haven't done, because we just don't know. So let's embrace this together and move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting you said that because from a personal perspective, I've worked with leaders sometimes, and that fear of not letting people building relationship with their team individually, with their,
Hmm. Yeah.
and as a team as a whole, but basically individually, feeling that I can't let them know or see me be vulnerable. And like
Mhm.
that comes into the human component of
Yeah.
they know they can be vulnerable. Everybody can
Yeah.
be vulnerable at some point about something. And so
Right.
when they they'll really what happens, I've seen happen with leaders when that little piece of I can't let my guard down or my vulnerability down, what happens is now we move into not taking care of themselves because it's a piece of self-care, right? Being vulnerable and being able to be vulnerable, and also it's the first step to taking self-care of yourself to say you're right, that you're human, and
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Mhm.
So I totally
Absolutely.
get where that comes from. But I also wanted, you mentioned about the pressure of being perfect. Okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know,
Trying to be perfect, right?
trying to be perfect and how it can hinder leadership, how it
Yeah.
can hinder your leadership. And I was talking to someone the other day. Let me see, I had wrote this down. Um, okay, here it is. Oh, okay. I had talked to someone the other day, and they're a coach that works with, it's a coach, and she was talking about well-being and working with the whole person, and that vulnerability piece comes in, and
Yeah.
talking about um wellness should be the forefront of this. And
Mhm.
if you have these barriers and you're not vulnerable, or let yourself be vulnerable, be human, so to speak, how that really affects you both, psychologically and physically. So
Yes.
that perfect image, and how it can hinder your growth. Have you had clients or known want to speak on how it can hinder leadership growth when you will have to have this perfect image?
Yeah. It's I keep saying it's so interesting because it is, this topic is interesting.
Hmm.
And yes, I've coached several people there, but it has to be perfect. They'll actually use that phrase. But I want to work on it. And I'll ask, well, how many times have you revisited this task? Probably five, six, seven times. So, okay, so what on the sixth time told you you wanted a seventh? What is it about shaping this? And if you didn't do that, then what? And then panic sets in. Well, I have to look at it several times in order for it to be perfect. And a lot of times we don't think about, first of all, the word exists, but we say it's not achievable. Perfection is really that perception
Hmm.
of perfection, right? And then sometimes we don't have a clear perception of it. So we keep reaching for something that is very hard to define. And that's what stops us from progressing. And the energy that we put there, we're not putting in the people that are looking to us as leaders. We're not putting it in the energy of what we can do to contribute to the overall goal. We're so busy and wrapped up in that perfectionism that it doesn't get everyone, including us, where we need to be. And that well-being is, just imagine just trying to create the perfect picture, and you look at it and it's not perfect. You do it again, it's not perfect. And you do it again, it's not perfect. And you do it again. It's just you'll never get there. And when it comes to your own well-being, it's almost like continuing to let yourself down. So you're doing it over and over again. And how that works on the psyche. I'm not a psychiatrist, psychologist,
Right.
therapist, counselor. I'm not going to try to veer in that lane at all.
Mhm.
But basically, in the simplest form, we're tearing ourselves down, creating self-imposed barriers because we're trying to reach this level of perfection that really doesn't exist. Because if I'll say this to whoever's watching, if you're a perfectionist and you've done something over and over again and then you finally let it go, I bet you before you went to sleep that night, you were like, oh, and I could have changed this one more thing, right? because it because you're thinking of perfection and it's shifting in your mind the whole time. Right. So if you did that, then you're truly a perfectionist, but you also have to be aware of how it can hinder progress
Right.
and how it can chip away at what you feel like is your confidence,
Mhm.
because it's still not getting to where you want it to be.
Mhm. One of
Yeah.
my mantras when it comes to that, especially when it comes to my writing. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't look at myself as I'm a good writer. I'm not a
Yeah.
real good writer, but I'm a decent writer. But something that I learned from my writing coach, when I had a writing coach, and I keep this kind of a sticky note nearby me. Done is better than perfect, meaning you can write and go back and redo it and rewrite it and blah. But if you look at done is better than perfect because you've done it, it's done. Not to say that you're gonna go back and rewrite, but in rewriting for me, I'm trying to make it perfect the first time. And
Right.
he's
Yeah.
like, just get it out, don't
Right.
worry about it being perfect. Done is better than perfect because you can
Mhm.
always come back and you will. You'll come back and you'll rewrite, a section, or you're right. You'll think about, I want to go this way instead of it,
Mhm.
the end happening that way or something,
Mhm.
but done is better than
It's better
perfect.
than
So
perfect.
I keep that mantra close to me because you're right. You will, it will never be,
Mhm.
perfect is like, that's infinity to me.
Yeah, it just keeps going,
Yeah.
and our perception of it keeps changing because it's there and like, but I can do this. It's there. That I think that where we get lost as perfectionists, because I am there,
Hmm.
like I said, I'm trying to give up that subscription, but it's just a constant work in progress in that, okay, you need to let this go,
That's right.
Nicole. You need to, it's really good the way it is right now, and the standard you're looking for is that dial is always going to move.
Right.
So you can decide at this point that this is good, and not just because there's a deadline,
Hmm.
but because it is.
Right.
And hands off, let it go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about fear, or I should say, not fear, but resistance to change
Hmm.
your feedback and how that can be a self-imposed barrier. So, why do you think some leaders resist feedback or change, and how does this become a self-imposed barrier for them?
Oh, wow. The only thing in life that is what is constant is change.
Yeah.
So whether we love it or hate it, it's still going to happen.
Mhm.
So the thing with leaders and feedback or not receiving them, first of all, the higher you get up, the less feedback you receive, right? So we start to kind of float in this atmosphere of, I'm all good. I need to give feedback to other people. I'm not necessarily asking or expecting feedback for myself. And the thing is, a lot of leaders, including myself, as a senior vice president, I have a team, I have people that I work with. I need that, and I'm from the talent development, learning and development background because I know the importance of growth and information. But that feedback is so important because you could be riding along as this good leader, but is your goal to be a great leader? Is your goal to be an impactful leader? Is your goal to be an empathetic leader that connects with the people around you? And if you don't know what people are thinking and feeling and their perception of you, then you don't know if you're rubbing someone the wrong way. You don't truly know if you're doing stuff that is really great in terms of leaning into your strengths. And you may be completely unaware of the impact you're having on other people, the clients, the organization, if you don't get the feedback. And when it comes to change related to that and resistance to it, it's easier to flow the way you've been flowing than it is to change your flow.
Mhm.
It's so much easier. It's like staying in the box. And if I can stay in this box and thrive, that's what I'm going to do. But at some point, it becomes a survival because that's all you have to work with, and nobody is giving you information to help you get out of this box. It gets comfortable,
Mhm.
but sometimes you have to think about, does the comfort bring complacency?
Yes.
And if it does bring complacency, that means there's no growth. And change, when people tell you feedback or the change that happens, whether it's positive or negative, is happening for a reason. So being flexible enough to see how that change is impacting you and the people that you're responsible for, that's your responsibility as a leader to do that.
I think also um, the word feedback a lot of times has a stigma.
Oh, yeah.
It's a big
Yeah.
stigma. And people sometimes will look at feedback as criticism.
Mhm.
And I think in a growth mindset, looking at feedback is more about constructive, meaning something that's going to help me be better or something that's I need to take into consideration that I may need to change. So I
Mhm.
always like to look at feedback through a lens of constructive, not something that says, well, you did this wrong. Okay, or this was bad, or you did this wrong. So I think that a lot of times is the barrier to why people don't want to give it, the
Yeah.
self-imposed because they don't want to give it, and then they
Mhm.
don't want to receive it because they're looking at it through the fixed, the fixed
Right.
mindset of
Mhm.
something's wrong or
Yeah.
my inability to do something instead of looking at it through a growth mindset that I can get better because of it. Because
Yeah.
so, um,
And let's be clear, it depends on how the feedback is delivered too.
true. That's true.
Some people, well, did you get feedback? But if the person isn't delivering well, like you said, you did this wrong, you did that wrong. That's not the most positive way to give feedback. First of all, is it balanced? What am I doing well? What should I continue to do? But if it's a focused conversation on what someone needs to change, it can be constructive in that when this happens, this is the impact and this is the expectation. This is what we need to change. This is what you specifically need to take responsibility in changing, or even giving them the opportunity to say, okay, I need to change that. These are some ways I can do it. Giving them that responsibility because they own it more than, right?
Right.
As leaders, as direct reports, whomever it may be. And it is so important. And feedback does get that stigma of, oh my gosh, someone is about to talk about me in a way that I don't know is positive. Am I ready to hear that and embrace it and actually put some action into it? And it could be a scary thing for people to give it because they don't know how a person is going to respond. What I found is people are more fearful of the response of that person than actually how to give the feedback. if I give it a certain way, this person may cry, they may get upset, they may become aggressive, they may not detour, but deflect and
Yeah, right. Yeah,
the feedback,
right.
or just don't agree with me. What do I do in those situations as someone giving the feedback or a leader? And when they don't know, that's when the fear sets in, and it stops them from sharing what needs to be shared with the individuals that need the feedback.
Mhm. It was interesting. A couple of weeks ago, during the holidays, I was talking with a person and they were telling me about someone they work with had um, hadn't put their foot down. There was a situation where there needed to be some tough love. And they were, the person I was talking to was telling this person, you need to give tough love. And the person is an adult, and adults, like you say, didn't deflect, but just wasn't accepting the feedback that way. But then
Hmm. Hmm.
after the person, and I said, well, the person did give the tough love. And I said, well, did you ask them, how did that feel? And what happened because of that? Because if you had to ask that person a little bit about, instead of telling that person you need to give them tough love, but the
Yeah.
person gave tough love and you kind of was like, well, how do you feel about that? What are you going to use from that in the future? Things to say that um, you the person has the aha moment to understand that, I did that. I really did that. And I feel good that I went ahead and did it. But to tell me, well, you need to give someone tough love is not
Mhm.
is automatically a barrier is going to fall in place
Yeah, that's
because
going to be tough.
yeah,
Tough
I
love.
mean,
Yeah.
right. But and true enough, that may have been the case. But
Hmm.
once that person gave the tough love, you and giving them, kudos around that, that I love that you did that. That was great. How'd that feel? How could you do some more of that? They are going to become aware. They're going to recognize the fact of, yeah, I can do this. It's something that I have to do, but I can do that. So,
Hmm.
right.
It's
It's all
possible.
about it has a lot to do with the delivery as well, the way that
Oh
we,
yeah, absolutely. And I heard a phrase on a TV show once. It said, "Just because it's hard doesn't mean you shouldn't do it."
right,
Right. And that's what we go. We can go around doing easy stuff all day
right,
long, but that's not the role we're
right.
in, to have easy things all the time.
Mhm.
Sometimes it is challenging, sometimes it is difficult. And just like, failure or mistakes, there's learning that happens there. Also doing something that's really difficult and challenging, there's a lot of learning in that space too. And when we learn, we grow.
Hmm. Nicole, I want to talk a little bit because this also was something that kind of came up when it came to self-imposed barriers, and that was
Mhm.
procrastination and
Oh,
what they call
yeah.
decision paralysis. And
Yeah.
I want to tell a little thing about me. I'm going to own up
Okay.
to this.
I
It's
can't wait to hear it.
It's like one of my goals. I made a goal the beginning of the year that there's something that I have been procrastinating about, and I've had paralysis about going ahead and doing it. And this has been, and should have done this maybe, oh, I don't know, maybe a year ago.
Mhm.
And I'm had to really have a conversation with myself and with some others and kind of work through this, that why am I procrastinating? And this is a barrier that simply I need to get over. I know I can do it, but I've been putting it off. And that means, so it's a barrier for me to move to the next level of where I want to go in regards to my, private practice. And so that's that fixed mindset. And so I have made the decision, and I kind of talked through that with someone, and I kind of made the decision that it's going to get done by March 31st. It's going to get
Yeah.
done. It should have been done a
Hmm.
long time ago. I have the fear of like you say, the fear of failure.
Hmm.
I want to do it, but I know it has to be done. So that long-term effect is the year, meaning the long-term effect was delaying me from doing what I need to do or making that decision to go ahead and
Yeah.
take that next step that I need to take. So let me ask you. So that's just my true confession on
Mm-hmm.
procrastination.
Are you about to ask me to confess?
No, I'm not going to ask you to confess.
Okay.
Want to ask you, well, what are your feelings on long-term effects of delaying decisions and avoiding tasks in leadership roles?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So just personally, something that I value a lot is
Mm-hmm.
time.
Okay.
I value time. And I think it's related to, obviously, it's related to everything we do, everything we don't do, everything we delay, everything we move forward. And when it comes to thinking about what I need to do for something specifically, it if I don't take the time in that moment, then I feel like I'm wasting it.
Okay.
Right. And when it comes to things we want to do for ourselves, for our people as a leader, if we get caught up in not making a decision when it's going to impact so many, including ourselves, then that's time wasted. Right. And that's not to say you have to hurry up and do it. I think the analysis is necessary, the process is necessary, the steps are. But when you bring in the perfectionism of something being perfect, or when you bring in the excuse of not knowing, and just not educating yourself so you can know and make a decision. And when you have all of these things around you and it's time and you can make a decision and you don't, that's a conscious decision not to make a decision.
Right.
So with that time, you are either taking that energy and keeping it right. Energy moves, right? It has motion, but you can trap it. You can trap the energy and it stays right there as opposed to opening up those gates and then letting things flow to the point where I think I have enough information to do this. And for people who do get stalled with making decisions, I think creating criteria for yourself. If I have this, and this, I am going to make a decision because I know if I don't put any perimeters around that, then I'm going to swirl and swirl and swirl into a space where no decision is going to be made, or I'm hesitant about it, or I lose sleep about the decision that I wasn't confident about.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's so important to be aware of that. And that's the whole thing, being aware of the self-imposed barriers
Right.
so that we can intentionally say, I'm going to put these perimeters around that so I won't procrastinate. I'm going to believe that 75% is great and it doesn't have to be 100% because that dial is going to continue to move
Mm-hmm.
anyway.
Yeah.
The fear of failure. But if I don't fail, how do I learn what it is that I need to do next and not having being afraid of that failure? And oftentimes I ask my coaching clients, what would you do if you weren't afraid?
Mm-hmm.
And they can answer that question so simply. So, how can you do it with the fear? Is the next question. Yeah, how can you still do it with the fear?
Right. Right. Well, I put parameters on in the first quarter for me.
Yeah, that's your parameter, right?
My
March
parameter.
31st, I am
Yep.
going to do that.
It's gonna be
That's my
done.
measurement. It's going to be
Right.
done. And you can already feel, you
Mhm.
can anticipate
Hey,
how you're going to feel come March 31st. Like,
right.
whew, I
Yep.
got that done. I did it. It's a
Yep.
realistic time frame for you by your own criteria. It'll give you the time to do it.
Right.
And also not feeling guilty about the year that you you didn't do it,
Didn't do it
right?
right.
Because we take that on too. It's like, I
Yeah.
should have done this a long time
I
ago.
know it. I should have done
Yeah,
it
it's just like,
yesterday.
no, I should, but that's beating yourself up. And
Yeah, it is.
what purpose
Uh-huh.
does that serve for anyone?
Right.
It's like I think of the Lion King. I like the animated version of Lion King. I like
Okay.
them all, but the
Yeah.
animation version the best. And Rafiki, when he, Simba is like, but I did this and that, and then all of a sudden he cracks him over the head with the stick. He says, "Doesn't matter. It's in the past." We can't do anything. We can't
Right.
dismantle anything that has been done in the past. You can't unring the bell.
Mhm.
So, what can you learn from that
Mhm.
and move forward in your focus being specifically on March 31st and getting it done, as opposed to any words or energy you can put to I should have done, I should have done, I should have.
Mhm.
It's that's done, it's over. It's probably a reason why you
Yeah.
couldn't do it. You just don't know. You either you know or you don't, but March 31st
Yeah.
is
That's
what
it.
you're headed toward.
Right. That's what I'm heading for. And that's right. That's another thing. I there was a trainer I work with, trainer slash friend. And when it came to, so, there's so many things around that. When it came to like working out and stuff, it was like, okay, you didn't work out the last 2 weeks. That was yesterday. You leave that behind, you start with today and you move forward. You never beat yourself up about what you could have done yesterday or last week. For him, it was always a fresh start. It's a fresh
Mm-hmm.
start today. And
Mm-hmm.
that was, his mantra. It's a fresh start today. Not what you
Yeah.
did yesterday, fresh start today and keep it moving forward. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because doing anything else, it doesn't serve you.